Right, okay. I think yes, we are live. I can see the clock ticking. So, good morning, everybody, in this wonderful group called Banquet of Life, which I set up a couple of months ago, I think. Just to energize people, create more positivity in people's lives, and just get in tune with their energy. So, I've got a wonderful guest called. Her name is Bridget Long, and I've known her for a few years now. We go back, I think, when I first started exploring a new business, and I encountered a wonderful company called New Skin. Fell in love with their products. As you can see, I use the products daily. I also use them on my clients in the therapy center, and they really hold back the clock, turn back the hands of time into and keep us youthful, both on the inside and on the outside. And obviously the energy I do also enhances that. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Bridget. She's a wonderful coach and mentor. She is an entrepreneur for many decades, and she has triumphed through thick and thin and come out the other side smiling, I think, always smiling. She's very positive and energizing to be around, and that's why I love her company. She always sort of validates other people before herself, so she lifts other people up especially when they're down. And I have great pleasure in interviewing her this morning, and she knows a lot about this subject, the power of the imagination. And we'll take it away now. So Bridget, if you could just briefly give an introduction to yourself. Obviously I didn't want to mention too much with my introduction myself, and also if you've used the power of the imagination along that career or that path that you've taken to reach this point now.
Esther, thank you so much for your very, very kind introduction. I'm always touched to hear that I've been able to have a positive impact on people's lives, and it's been an incredible journey. These 3+ decades of being an entrepreneur, but the inner journey has really been the one that has always fascinated me most. So just very briefly, my name is Bridget. I live in Poole in Dorset on the south coast in the UK. I'm 57, and I am a mum of 3, 2 grown-ups and still 1 teenager at home. I started my entrepreneurial journey, well, I would probably say from birth, because I was born in the cradle of an entrepreneurial family. And very soon started to learn about the principles of business. My father used to say, never work for money, always make money work for you. And be passionate about what you do, but never forget it's about making money. So it really was, that kind of environment that I grew up in. And despite being a very able student, I decided that corporate life was not for me at a very young age, and then I went into a long period of experimentation for over 20 years in Paris, actually in France, which is where I lived for over 2 decades when my children were born, until such time as I realized that my ladder was up the wrong wall. I think that's probably,
That's a nice analogy.
Yeah, 2008, 2009. For those of you who are old enough to remember, there was a big economic meltdown globally, and my personal life was also in meltdown. And I started to ask myself some very existential questions about, what I wanted the rest of my life to look like. And so I was open to change. I really wanted change in every level of my life: financial, relationships, well-being, and so on. And they say, when the student is ready to learn, the master appears. And I was introduced to first of all, I retrained as an image consultant and a life coach. Living in Paris for 20 years, the shopping habit rubs off on you a little bit. But I very soon realized that was only going to be like a passion business, but it could never really support my family financially. And at that point, then I found myself as being a single mother with really shouldering all the responsibilities. And then somebody introduced me to, the wonderful anti-aging technology of New Skin. And of course, I first of all wanted to validate the the efficacy of the product. I knew that it was a very, very good product and that it made a difference. I always say I don't know if they're the best products in the world because I haven't tried them all, but I did know that they worked and that it would I would be able to bring this technology to the marketplace, really based on not just efficacy but integrity, and also really adding value to people's lives. Then a little bit later, I realized that behind this there was that vehicle that I had been looking for all my life, which was something that I could build it once and build it well and be paid for the rest of my life, because really ultimately what we're all seeking is freedom. And whether that's freedom of financial freedom, health freedom, and freedom within ourselves, right? Freedom to wake up every morning and really feel absolute joy and peace of mind, and being the absolute master of one's life. So I decided to take it very seriously, quite simply. It was really a case of going all in. Was it a hero's decision at the time? No, it was a survival decision, because I could see that this was something that if I did take seriously could really provide me with freedom. But did I realize the full journey at the time? Of course not. I only saw a little snippet, if you like, of what would be required in terms of my internal shifts in order to create what I've created now in the last 9.5 years. So moving forward to where we are today, we've done millions and millions in sales over the last few years. There have been some huge shifts in the way that the industry works, but ultimately, probably 98% of the work has been the inner work, and that's really what has enabled me to, put together, tools through my learnings and through my experience. Right, it was really a question of this being experiential rather than just conceptual or theoretical, because I've always worked from a viewpoint that in order to be entitled to speak of these things, one has to have experienced them and to be able to have shown results. Okay, so this is really where I came in from, and then I just, despite myself, started teaching it to others, sharing what I'd learned, sharing what I'd experienced, and sharing the results. And little by little, a kind of a pattern emerged. And today we really are on the sort of like the cusp of taking things to the next level in terms of being able to share this method. This is the how to get those shifts, how to really be able to create a different life. When ultimately we know that the only way we can create a different life is by making those internal shifts and having a different concept of oneself, changing one's level of consciousness. So I think there's a general acceptance that yes, for things to change, I need to change. But I need to know how to change. I need to know what the day-to-day actions are that I can do, which will enable me to make the shifts in order to create a better life. So that's where we are today.
Brilliant. So yeah, I can see that, for example, for me, understanding more about energy now and doing the inner work is key. And I think, we'll erect our own brick walls, don't we, in terms of trying to make progress, and we push it hard against it, don't we? And there's no matter what we can do unless, we dissolve it through, changing our mindset, changing our heart set as well, and the way we approach things, and learning to let go of what doesn't serve us, as well as embracing what we need to, in terms of our inner power. So why is it so important to harness the power of our imagination, in your view?
Well, first of all, it's all there is. It's all there is. We're so busy looking at our external world, wondering what we can change in our external world. But the first thing is to understand that our external world is only a physical printout of our internal world. That's sometimes very hard for people to accept, because we want to, I hesitate to use a word, but kind of like blame extenuating circumstances which just happen to us, but ultimately things happen through us, and in order to change the trajectory in our finances, in our relationships, and in our health, first of all, the shifts have to be internal. So really this is all there is. And when we start to learn the power of our mind, our imagination, and become aware, the first thing is really to become aware of what's holding us back, because we're sort of unconscious to really having that awareness of the thoughts that are creating our life, but we don't even, they're such, you know, grooved habitually into our way of thinking, we're not even aware of what they are. So the first part of the most important thing is to become really conscious of, you know, those thoughts that are holding us back. And sometimes, you know, something will come into our mind, and then having the reflex to say, do I want this thought to, you know, create my future? Probably not. And that's where that's where the fun starts, really. It's kind of like bringing it all to the surface. I use the word fun. It sometimes can be perhaps a little bit less fun, because we start to become aware of, oh, okay, now I know why I do this. I know why I attract these people in my life. I know why my bank account looks like it does. I know why I have, you know, the body I have, or whatever it might be. But first, the most important piece of work is to put into place the willingness to be aware of what is holding us back. And so when we start making those shifts internally, you know, the results come pretty fast, you know, they really do. And you start, you know, and then things come up. It's what Louise Hay calls cleaning the turkey pan. Okay, so it's a bit like being there. She calls it at Thanksgiving, and, you know, the turkey comes out and everybody's happy and they eat the turkey, and then they have to clean the pan. And so they add a bit of soap and washing up liquid, whatever it is, and they start scrubbing, and it looks even dirtier than it did before they started scrubbing it. And that's the cleaning out bit, right? We have to say, oh, it's just the turkey pan. So sometimes there's a period of disruption, which isn't always pleasant, but it is necessary in order to transcend to, you know, a different level of consciousness.
Mm.
But that's the important work. You know, the first thing is to, you know, really be conscious of that.
Mm. Because I know as a therapist, you know, we call it that healing crisis, and symptoms can get worse before they get better. So, but usually it's in the hope, the expectation that we will come out the other side and actually higher up than we ever were before, you know, and that's the trust in the process as well, isn't it? That
yes.
We will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Being willing to go through it. And I think that the willingness to go through this has to be backed by a burning desire. You know, a burning desire for a better life, you know, a really, to start off with a desire for change. It doesn't have to be in the beginning like something really, really specific. That will come later. But the first thing is just to surrender to that desire of, oh, you know what? I don't want to get to the end of my life and look back and have regret. I want to be able to live my best life. And that suddenly starts, you know, stirring things up. And as you say, sometimes it's not pretty, but it's always worth it. So it takes a bit of courage, you know, it takes belief, it takes courage, but ultimately it's always worth it, because, you know, just on the other side of that is truly, you know, everything we desire in a magical life.
Yeah. So do you see then as like visualization and use of the imagination is key to take us out of that stuck place? And, you know, and if we don't use the imagination, they could keep us stuck where we are, because we don't have a vision for where we could be and can be.
Yes.
Quite quickly.
Well, you know, it's the funny thing is about imagination is that we use it all the time. You know, we talk a lot about affirmations, but actually everything we think and everything we say is an affirmation. And so the first thing is to understand that our mind and our inner talk, which is permanent, non-stop, and never shuts up, is creating our future. Okay, so we're imagining all the time. We're imagining having imaginary conversations. We're having imaginary, you know, situations. We're going back over, you know, the past and you know, imagining things that way. And we're imagining also particularly things that we think is going to happen in the future. So our imagination is something that we already use, but the key is to learn how to become a master to direct it in the way that we want to direct it. And that's the work. That's day-to-day discipline of learning how to become a master of directing our thoughts in a particular way, or if you like, self-mastery. And you know, so 98% of people will probably, you know, go to their grave this time round not even understanding that they can do that. What I can direct my thoughts, what I can direct my imagination, what I can actually, direct the imagination to the way I want it to go? Yes, you can. And that's when really I come in to explain to people how to do that.
So that leads me on to the next question. So how do you, what sort of tools do you have in your toolkit to help people, you know, because it's very difficult. If people are very stuck in their sort of negative thoughts and self chatter, then how to sort of get them, pick themselves up and pull themselves out of this quagmire, as it were.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting to notice that, you know, obviously I'm just one of the many people on this planet who are talking about this stuff, and I just, you know, talk about it in my own words and through my own, you know, concepts and perceptions. But apparently, substantiated research shows that about 80% of what we think is negative, and about 80% of what we think is the same thing every single day. So that's the first thing we need to. Woo, okay. Whoa. We have a little bit of work to do. And again, going back to the baseline start is I am willing to change. I am willing to change. I can change. I want to change. And this is really where the process starts. And as humans, we don't like the feeling of being uncomfortable at the idea of letting go of our old selves, but we have to be able to let go of our old selves to change from the consciousness that we had, which has created what we have in our outside life today, to creating a new consciousness in order to create a different future. So, well, the daily disciplines, that's what it all comes down to, the nitty gritty. And over the years, I've done probably tens of thousands of hours of personal development. You know, my entire library is full of books, and I've studied and really, you know, drilled down into, you know, getting to the core, getting to the root, because we start from the root. And if we don't change the root, then we can't change the fruit. And the fruit being money, health, and happiness. Okay, so this has always been my, you know, my really deep desire is to be able to go to people with a package and say, okay, I've done it. I've put the practices in place. This is what works, step A to Z, and now it's up to you to do it. Because as one of my coaches says, you know, there's no weight that I lift in the gym which will put a muscle on your body. You know, we're just here to, you know, share what is possible, and then it's up to each and every person to really drill deep into themselves and say, do I want a better life? Yes, I do. Am I willing to change? Yes, I am. So for me, it's about then going into the daily disciplines and, you know, starting small. If this is something that nobody's ever done before, then it is really about creating new habits. And creating new habits is, you know, sometimes the biggest obstacle is like that, you know, we're all very good starters, but very few of us are good finishers. You know, being willing to really go through the process and see it through. And I have formulated over the course of time, you know, a system that works. It's not my system. It's just a kind of a smorgasbord of all the studies I've done over the course of the years, which is adapted to our 21st century life. Because what was relevant in terms of habits and usage maybe 100 years ago isn't quite, you know, adapt today. And, you know, what might be suitable for a single mother, a business owner, might not be suitable for, you know, a guy who's 25 and wanting to change. So we all have different lives, but this is a kind of like a general theme. And the first thing, the most important thing is morning and evening work. You know, we sometimes hear the word bookending or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. And then training ourselves to really use our imagination to, in the morning and in the evening, when our subconscious is most receptive. The first things first, though, is to know what you want. You've got to have yes. What you want, right? Because we cannot go into this, you know, controlled waking dream without knowing what we want. And I realized actually that's probably where most people
are stuck.
Right?
I think that you hit the nail on the head, because often people don't know, they know what they don't want, but they're not always clear about what they do want, is it?
Exactly. So it takes a bit of courage, first of all, to start with really thinking about our life. Now what I would say is, you know, if you've never done this before, again, start with something small. Start with something small, and then just understand that this is a journey, it's a path, and then the bigger things will reveal themselves as we start to grow. Okay, so it can be something small. It can be you know, just to reach the next level of promotion. It can be you know, whatever it might be. And if we're really stuck for thinking of something of ourselves, then we can start even less to think for somebody else. You know, thinking about somebody that we love. It might be our child or our spouse or a parent or a friend, whatever it might be, and knowing that they have something in their mind that, or something in their life that isn't good for them, seeing them in the perfect ideal of what you know that they would like for themselves. And then we have to learn the process of how to imagine in a controlled and masterful way. So what we realize is that the morning and evening meditations, the relaxations, is where it all happens. And the first thing is to have your desire, fix it on one thing, just to get started, okay? Because we don't want to be chasing two rabbits. We want to have our desire on one clear thing. And then there's a process to schedule in the time. It's not about finding the time, it's about making the time. If it means getting up a little bit earlier, if it means putting a meeting of the day back a bit later, it doesn't matter. We can all do this if we are really desiring to do it, if we really want change and we're really willing to change. And so the first thing is that there's a very simple technique. I work with it on a one-to-one with, you know, many of my students and business partners, which is really very, very simple. Is about being in the same place, in a chair, sitting on your bed, wherever is comfortable, getting into a state of very deep relaxation. Very deep relaxation. Again, you know, there's a process for this, but it normally starts with just breathing, right? Taking the time to breathe, letting go of everything, and then bringing in the visualization of the ideal of the first thing that you want to start working with. And that's fine, but it's only half of the recipe. The other half of the recipe is going into the feeling of the assumption of having already achieved our desire. So we hear a lot about visualization, but where most people will stumble, think, oh, I've been trying to visualize this for the last 10 years and nothing's happening and blah, blah, blah. It is about having the feeling of already having achieved what we desire. And that comes over the process. So sometimes to have a change of consciousness, we can ask ourselves the right questions. How would I feel if I were free? How would I feel at this moment were my desire realized? How would I feel? Oh. And that's when the emotions start to come. Happiness, joy, peace of mind, gratitude, all those emotions, because it is the vibration of emotion which sets the realization into action, which sets the desire into action towards its realization, I should say. Until such time as we live in the emotional assumption of the realization of our desire, that desire will stay nothing but a wish. And this requires work and discipline. Now, everybody starts from a different level. We're all conditioned by probably before the age of 7. right? We know that everything we saw, we heard, and we experienced in terms of health, wealth, and money, health, wealth, and money, health, wealth, and happiness, is it happiness that in relationships our blueprint is pretty much in place really before the age of 5. And of course, most of us can't really consciously remember what our life was like before the age of 5. So I really like to do some deep inner, work on the young childhood before we start going into, finding the right path for each individual person. But ultimately, now is the time to make the change. And, sometimes in the beginning, as we said, it can be a little bit tough. But if we want it badly enough, we'll be prepared to go through the process. And we can check in with ourselves, not just in the morning and the evening, as we progress and as we grow continually throughout the day. Because the key to the realization of what we desire is to hold the feeling of the realization, hold the feeling that we would have of its realization permanently, no matter what is happening in our lives. Woohoo! That's an interesting one, right? So life happens, right? Things are going to happen that, we don't like, that make us stressed or anxious or whatever it might be. But our ultimate goal is to hold that feeling of absolute peace of mind, of joy, of happiness, of serenity, of tranquility, always, no matter what happens in our outside world. And little by little, as we train ourselves to do that, to hold in the feeling of the realization, then it's a really short path to its realization in its physical form. That is what life is, basically. To be able to hold ourselves in that position of absolute joy permanently. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have any suggestions you can make, how people can sort of reach out to you, or whether you can give them some support, give them suggestions of where they can go to research this subject area, a bit more?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I'm a very hungry student, and I'm always learning. So there are, plenty of books that people can start with. But I love to have a conversation with people first to see where they are before I start recommending resources. Because a resource that's worked very well for me recently might not necessarily work for somebody who's only just starting on their path. They might need something a little bit more simple or more digestible. So the first thing is, as I say to people, if anything I've said inspires you, then, you can message me via Esther. And I am looking to take on perhaps 2 or maybe 3 new students right now. I'm very, very, very protective of my time. I have a lot of Bridget time. So when I come to be able to work with my students, I'm in my own peak state, and I'm able to work at a high level of intuition and insight. So that's always that. I always offer a half an hour free consultation, and then to see if the person is ready and if they really want to do this. Often just that consultation alone, reveals some incredible things. And then we just take it from there. And then I do, a bespoke package around, whatever people want to work with. And we really, really make it into a really tailor-made program based on the principles of what I've just described, but then taking it into the needs and wants of each individual person, because we're all so unique and we have different wants and needs and different levels of understanding.
So does it mean, therefore, because it's so unique, everybody's got their own particular, I suppose, challenges, if you like, that journey, you can't actually sort of put a time frame to it? So it'll be whoever, or do you try and...
It will depend on how seriously the person takes it. It will, like everything in life, if we go in with a really committed will to do it well, then the results come faster. If it's sort of like a half-hearted approach, it's going to take longer. And if somebody, the first thing I say to people, if they really want to take it seriously, you've got to be accountable to me every day, 7 days a week. Okay. And that's the first thing I can see if people are ready or not. And it's not about judging people, saying they're not good enough. It just really to see the state of readiness. As soon as I know if I say to okay, you need to check in with me every day, tell me what you've done, give me a synopsis of your day, and people are like, yeah, I can do that. I know they're ready. And if they're not ready, they'll be like, what, really? I've got to, oh my goodness. Okay, well, wow. So I'll know how to tone it down a little bit and then, as I say, tailor make the level of commitment. So that will really decide on the level of commitment of each person. Yeah.
So in terms of people that have you supported any so far where you've actually seen some tangible results and changes?
Yes.
In terms of, their results, what they've managed to achieve or accomplish?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, my own. I've worked with a second generation Napoleon Hill mentor and put things into place when I worked with him last year. And I've had my own results of things that I set down in place, and I've seen, an acceleration, triple digit growth in my business, and but mainly my internal shifts have been absolutely colossal. So my own results in terms of, say, my financial, my well-being and so on have been, really tangible in the way that I put things in place thanks to his mentoring, and then passing that on. Working with some of my leaders in New Skin, wow! I mean, it's just been incredibly powerful to see, the growth in business, the growth in leadership, the growth in self-confidence. So measurable things, and then more kind of abstract things. But the two, of course, again, go together hand in hand, and it takes. Normally when I work with somebody, I'll do it quite intensely for 90 days. And I would say to make real, definitive, permanent shifts, it takes a year. It does take a year from the moment you decide to take it seriously. But when we can work on a timeline of a year, and then you just give people the tools, and then once they feel they're ready, they're on their way. But I think that, it is really a year commitment minimum to see palpable and permanent, shifts and change.
But of course, that's a small investment when you think, how much it could pivot, change your life, somersault it. So, and then you could be in such a better place, afterwards, and you got the rest of your life. Even if you're midlife, we can expect to live, well into our 90s now, certainly as women.
I work with people in their 60s and their 70s who really want change. It doesn't matter whether the runway is short or long. If you have one successful day, one day when you live in that absolute, joyful, peaceful, happy state, it's worth it. Even just for one day. There's always time. And the time is always now. Start where you are, and then just move forward from that point. I always say, people say to me, what's perhaps the most important thing in terms of your growth? I said it is about standing on the shoulders of giants, working with coaches, learning from the masters, being a hungry student, getting close to, what do I want to change in my life, and who do I need to get close to in order to achieve that?
That's why it's easier to work with somebody or with a small group of people, isn't it? Because doing it on your own is such hard work, because, it's all very well, if you've got a strong mental makeup, but at the end of the day, you can still be hammered by lots of things, by life, and sometimes, just taking a step back, taking somebody's advice, seeing it from the outside in rather than you into the inn, as it were, isn't it?
We're our own best advisors, right? I would say it's not just, I think it's impossible to do it on your own. You will always find that whoever it was, right from, the year dot, there's always been, a mentor for a student. And then the student often then becomes a mentor to someone else. And so it's passed on. That's all we're doing, we're just passing it on. And that's all we're doing here, Esther, is just passing it on. you know, from our mentors, and then we will go on to mentor others who will go on to mentor others.
Exactly. Yeah. And we have that ripple effect, which is lovely, you know, and if it's all for the good and the higher vibration of this planet, then yeah.
Always, absolutely. Yeah. So that's where we are today, and moving forward into the future, you know, I just
so I was going to say, that's your vision, to actually help as many people as possible, or, you know, what sort of dreams and plans do you have?
Well, I seen that you'd asked me that question, and yesterday I had a bit of a reveal, because sometimes what I realized was this morning, because I journal every single day, was that sometimes we are afraid to plan our lives because it puts us in front of our own death. And suddenly I was released from that kind of unconscious fear of, oh, what if I plan my life? That means that I bring to the conscious level that my life is finite. And so being able to then just immediately let go of that, it was very liberating. And my reason for building a large organization where was to create residual income, because ultimately I want to write, and I do have reasonable oratory skills, and people need to hear the message. And so the long-term vision is I have one more promotion to attain to in my new skin journey, which I'm in the process of doing. And then beyond that, to take time to write. And, you know, that's probably from a professional point of view where I'll go create resources, tools, write. And then eventually, when we all get back into stadiums, speak from a stage.
Brilliant. And I know you'll ace that completely. You're such a master orator. Yeah, brilliant. So you do have already a seed of an idea for a book, or you're going to keep that under wraps for now, or you're not sure?
Yes, I do.
All right.
It really is just a, you know, sort of a conglomeration of, you know, my journey, my learnings, and, you know, how I can really add value to people's lives by bringing with them a practical how to change your level of consciousness in the 21st century, based on all my learnings from, you know, the Bible upwards, which is the greatest personal development book of all time.
Brilliant. So I think to sum it up, so you would say, I mean, for you, imagination has been key, pivotal to hook into those desires, to actually also, it helps us, I presume it helps us to be more creative, to be more expansive with, you know, our thoughts, so that we are more creative. Yeah.
It builds belief, it builds courage, it builds discipline. And when we know that our imagination is just the voice in the head, and the voice in the head never shuts up, at that point we think, maybe I should be paying a little bit more attention to what that voice is saying. And so one leaving thought is, you know, whoever is watching this, pay close attention to what that voice in the head is saying, because that is your imagination creating your
reality,
chances, and your future.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Bridget. It's been a real treasure and a privilege to interview you and to talk about this. And I know you're very passionate and empowered by this, you know, area of self-development. So it's brilliant. Thank you.
Well, thank you for asking me, Esther. It's been an absolute delight, and let's do it again.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bridget. Bye-bye now.